The game begins with Max Caulfield and Safi breaking into an abandoned bowling alley. We get a little banter between the two with the idea that Max frequently visits deserted locations for picture-taking opportunities. The adventure ends with Max almost getting crushed, which leads to the two heading for the snapping turtle. But first we get Max in some sort of daydream thinking back to a classic line from Life is Strange 1.
My powers might not last.
That's okay. We will.
Chloe!
We then meet Amanda, who clearly has some interest in Max. We hear a little bit about Max's road trips and what she's been up to between Life is Strange 1 and right now. Then she's asked by Safi the question of who the blue-haired girl is that Max keeps a picture of. This is the player's chance to determine if Chloe and Max were friends or a couple, and if Chloe is now alive or dead. Max is pushed by Safi to talk to Amanda, so she goes around the bar to learn more about her, learn pickup lines, and more. We meet a few new characters through this, like Reggie and Diamond, who we'll come back to later. Max talks to Amanda, an agreement is reached to hang out with each other, but the player can also choose between being a friendship-type hangout or a relationship-type hangout. Max heads back to Safi, and Moses arrives. Moses talks about how there's a meteor shower that night, and that the three of them can hang out and watch it together. We jump to that night where the three of them are sitting together watching the asteroids. Safi asks Max what she would do if there were 24 hours before the world ends. We get more banter between the three of them, and then Moses tells Max to try to slip a bottle cap to Safi without her noticing. You can fail at this or actually succeed. Safi gets an important phone call and then has to leave. Max goes to take a picture of the moon, but then her head starts throbbing, prompting her to leave. On Max's walk, you can find an odd Polaroid that will continue to come up later through collectibles. When Max goes to take a picture of an owl, she blacks out, and here's a flashback to lines she and Chloe said in the 5th episode of Life is Strange. Max's nose starts bleeding, and she sees Safi's footprints in the snow and runs after them. She catches up enough to see that Safi is at the top of the hill on her phone, but she feels the need to check on her anyway. Max hears a gunshot and sees some sort of waves in the air in front of her. When she turns the corner, she sees Safi is still alive and on her phone. Max walks up to Safi on the bench, asking her if she's okay, but when she goes to nudge her, Safi falls down and she's dead. Max cries as Moses rushes up to see what happened. Then we hear this iconic line.
Don't say that! I won't trade you! No matter what you choose, I know you'll make the right decision. Max, it's time.
And we jump onto the next day with Max taking stock of her pictures. She adds Safi to the wall before realizing that a picture is missing. She finds it, and depending on the choice that you made, it'll either be Chloe by herself or Max and Chloe on the road. Max's lines are also different when reflecting on the picture, depending on which choice you pick. She goes to lay down until she sees she has missed calls and texts from Amanda, with the last one being that she's coming over to check on her. Max can look around her home while cleaning it up, with the biggest thing of note being her memory box, which will again be slightly different based off what you chose, whether it's Arcadia Bay or Chloe. Amanda arrives and we hear that Max has been locked away in her house for the last 2 days. The two talk, and then Amanda suggests that Max maybe taking a photo of her will make her feel better. Max gets a call from Safi's mom, Yasmin, who's the president of Caledon. Max gets asked if she's ever experienced a loss like this, to which you can answer yes or no. Yasmin asks to talk to Max in person, so Max and Amanda walk to the North Quad. Max goes to talk to Vin, who also has a history with Safi, although that's somewhat secret. Before talking to Yasmin, Max can chat with Gwen, who needs help getting a book that's locked up. After getting the book for Gwen, we hear a little bit about the book that Safi was working on, and she was pretty secretive of it. Max then meets with Yasmin over the loss of Safi, and she tells Max that her family was a bit messy, and the police have not ruled out, let's say, self-elimination. She asks Max if she thinks that's possible, to which you as the player can answer yes or no. Next up, Max notices Gwen on the phone acting shady, but she's caught by Loretta Rice, who asks her for a soundbite for her podcast. The question immediately rubs Max the wrong way, and you can choose whether to answer it or not. Not answering it, though, will result in Loretta ratting you out to Gwen that you were eavesdropping, which severely damages your relationship. Max then goes to talk to Moses about how he's dealing with the loss of Safi. Safi. Outside, we see Lucas giving a speech on Safi, although it's more of a promotion for himself and his book than actually grieving the loss. You can ignore this altogether and walk away, or interrupt his speech, insult him a little, and vent a bit on how she was murdered and how no one seems to be taking it all that seriously. Max then talks to Moses again, and we get a little background into how him and Safi met and what they meant to each other. Max stands up and she starts to hear strange noises. She holds her hands up and starts to see outlines of people not there in her timeline. She follows the pulse of Moses until she reaches Safi. Max struggles to fully materialize Safi, but she's able to tear into the other reality and reunites. On to Chapter 2. Max snaps out of a daze in the Snapping Turtle, sitting with Safi and Yasmin. She thinks she's just rewinded time, but she's unsure of what's going on. They're once again talking about Safi's book deal, though, and Max's nose starts to bleed, so she excuses herself from the table. She's now able to walk around the bar and explore in both the dead and alive timeline. She can talk to Amanda and generally just walk around, but then she goes back to Safi and Yasmin in the alive timeline, where Safi checks in on her nosebleed. We then find out that someone threw a cow skull that was hanging in the bar through Safi's windshield. Max notices something was written on it, and even though Safi moves on and leaves, Max does more investigative work. Through using both timelines to solve the puzzle, she discovers that Lucas signed the skull. Max then asks Amanda about this and finds out that Lucas was the one that gifted the skull to the bar in the first place, although Amanda didn't see him last night when the skull went missing. Max then heads outside and runs into Vin, where she tries to get more info. Vin won't help her until she finds what he's missing, so she heads to Diamond. We find out there's been some friction in this club called Abraxas, very reminiscent of the Vortex Club in Life is Strange 1, with her wanting to take the role of president, which Vin currently has. Max discovers that Vin is keeping an eye on her because he thinks she took his phone, which she has not. Max tells Vin that Diamond didn't take the phone, but she also doesn't know who did. In exchange for that info, asks Vin about Safi's car. Vin catches on that Max is asking who in Abraxas would do something like that, not just generally. But through defending the organization, he accidentally talks about Safi's windshield, something that Max never mentioned. Max then heads inside and overhears Lucas talking to his ex-wife about his son. She breaks into his briefcase to find he's putting a restraining order out on Safi. He catches her, explains the situation, which is that his son said he was saying specific things to him that he never said, and asks Max to not send Safi a picture of the restraining order. You can either choose to listen or not listen to him. Not listening, though, will destroy any relationship between Max and Lucas. Max then heads into Gwen's office. She previously got escorted out by the police for reasons we don't know yet, and Max does some digging and finds out there was some sort of back and forth between Safi and Gwen, that Gwen had helped push for Safi's book deal in the first place, but then seems to have canceled it on her. Then we go back to Vin, in which Max calls him out on the windshield comment, which he brushes off, but he can't get into his phone and needs the code. Through some timeline puzzles, Max gets that code and starts to go through Vin's phone, where she finds that him and Safi had a much more intimate relationship than she thought they did. When she walks outside, she finds Reggie panicking. She waves everyone away and questions him on what happened. He says he saw himself on the overlook and then ran away. She tells Loretta to take care of him and heads there herself. At the top of the overlook, we find Gwen, who vents about what has happened to her. Turns out there's security footage of her selling drugs to students, hence why she was escorted out by the police earlier. She has a hard drive that has the evidence of her doing it, and she burns it. Max can either stand by her side as it happens, or reach in and take it. By doing that, though, you're going to damage the relationship further. As she leaves, Max questions her about the book deal, to which Gwen says some mysteries are better left that way. In the dead timeline, Max takes the tarp off where Safi had died to find that flowers have grown in the perfect position of Safi's body. She's interrupted by Loretta and is able to tell her what Reggie saw. No matter what, though, Loretta comments on how none of this makes sense, but that a beat cop talked about a self-elimination tip earlier. She also tells Max about a student named Maya Alcada, a friend of Safi's who died a few years ago in a somewhat similar situation. Max gets several text messages from Moses asking her to come to his office immediately. It's there we meet Detective Alderman, who wants to get into Moses' office in search of Safi's camera that went missing. Moses tells Max that he did take it and he hid it in his office and needs her to retrieve it. Through a lot of time manipulation, including swapping physical objects from one timeline to another, Max is able to get the camera. Alderman stops her on the way out, though, and tells her about the camera and asks for her help if she learns anything. You can accept or refuse this offer, although accepting will result in Moses being pretty mad at Max a few times in future scenes. Back at Max's house, she goes down to the darkroom to check the camera with Moses. They find the picture that Safi took of all three of them, which they assume to be her last picture. But then we see this.
What is this?
No matter what Max says to Moses in this moment, he ends up storming out. Chapter 3 begins with Max waking up in her darkroom. She looks at all the evidence, which will vary depending on what happened with Gwen, but the end result is her still not understanding how she could have been the one to shoot Safi. She heads upstairs, but Alderman comes to her door. She puts the picture on her counter and can't let Alderman see it. Alderman starts talking about her past. He knows what happened to Arcadia Bay generally, and although the dialogue changes a little depending on which choice you made in terms of the ending, Alderman believes that all the death leads directly back to Max. He also becomes very mad, not understanding how the telescope switch happened in Chapter 2, but he does believe Max has something to do with it. As he leaves, he sees the picture that Max failed to hide. Max, still confused as to how she could have done what the picture says she did, tries to use her ability from the first game. Up until this point, we were told she lost that ability and hasn't been able to rewind time since the first game. But by focusing, she's able to jump into the picture. Max sees Safi taking a picture of her and discovers a storm very similar to the storm in Life is Strange 1 is there, which is odd because it wasn't there the day that Safi died. No matter what questions Max asks Safi, she doesn't get far. Safi tells her to stop stalling and to pull the trigger. Max gets a headache and is transported back to the current time with no real answers, except being able to definitively say that was her who killed Safi. Max concludes that she has to tell Moses everything and heads off to meet him at the Overlook. Max admits she shot Safi, although she doesn't know why or when specifically it'll happen. She explains to Moses the situation and tries to explain alternate timelines, which Moses agrees to believe if Max can prove it to him. Max does this and Moses trusts her. She then tells him about her past with Arcadia Bay, that she was able to rewind time and could go back even further if she had pictures. Max tells him about going through the photo and that she believes there's going to be a time in the future where she has to decide to not shoot or shoot Safi, which will break the timelines up into what we have going on right now. As they're still talking, they see Alderman in the alternate timeline. He's doing an investigation on Safi's death, but seems to be a day behind. As Max and Moses try to leave, they're stopped by their timeline's Alderman, who claims to have caught them, but can't believe that small-timers like them got under his skin. Just as he's about to get Max, he sees himself as well. He goes to touch himself on the shoulder and starts to get sucked in. He grabs onto Max for help, but no matter what Max chooses, Alderman disappears into himself. Max, who's still reeling from what just happened, goes to talk to Gwen. She tells her she knows about the book deal and that she got it canceled. What Gwen tells you depends generally on how you've treated her to that point, but she brings up Maya and how closely connected Safi and Maya were. How upset Safi was when she died, and how she blamed a lot of people in the aftermath. Max then goes to talk to Yasmin about Safi and Maya, but when she asks about the connection, Yasmin lies to her face and reduces the size of that relationship. You can call her out here or not, but again, no matter what you do, you don't get very far. Max is then stopped by Amanda on her way out, asking what she was just talking to Yasmin about. The conversation doesn't go very far beyond it being a little weird that Amanda is there in the first place. Next up, Max goes to talk to Vin about Maya and also doesn't get far. To get more info, she gives Diamond some info on Vin to get the alternate timeline of him talking. We find out that Vin sent out a statement after Maya died that she was troubled and she wants an explanation on it. Vin tells her everything leads back to Lucas, that he has blood on his hands, but not literally from his connection to Maya. Next up, Max goes to Lucas's office. Now, depending on what she did with the restraining order, he'll either be be nice with her, chat with her, still not give her a lot of info, but just generally be okay. The other option is he'll flat out hate her and kick her out of the office and you get nothing. Either way, Max needs to head to the other timeline where Lucas isn't in his office to look around. She finds out that Maya was indeed a student of his, but the bigger revelation is it seems that Lucas stole Maya's work and used it in his widely popular book. Max goes to talk to Safi, who's extremely mad at her for digging all this stuff up. She tells Max to leave her alone and storms out. Next up, we go to the Snapping Turtle, where Max is debating calling Chloe or Joyce, depending on which ending you picked, but decides against it no matter which one. It's here Max is allowed to roam around, talk to people, get more collectibles, and other things. One thing you can do is give Gwen back the evidence Max took and tell her she can fight it due to how weird it is if that's what you picked up until this point. The bigger thing that can happen is pursuing relationships. She can go on a hangout type date with Amanda, pretending to be at a concert, and then go in for a kiss depending on the choices that you've made. She can also play smash or pass with Vin and kiss him if you choose, or you could romance neither of them, or technically you can romance both of them. Upon returning home, Max finds her house destroyed. Someone broke in and is clearly looking for something. She tracks the culprit to the basement to discover it's her. Other Max rushes out of the house, and our Max chases after her. She eventually catches herself and is careful not to touch as she saw what happened to Alderman. Other Max questions why Max cares so much about all these clues for Safi without getting anywhere. Our Max falls off the edge and is touched by her alternate self, but nothing happens. Other Max walks out on the ice and falls through. Our Max pulls her out, swaps the lakes of the different timelines, and we find out that this Max is none other than Safi, shape-shifting as Max. Chapter 4 begins with Max taking stock of everything that just happened. She brought Safi home with her and begins to question her. This conversation is long, so what generally is discussed is Max's past, her time powers, and her new timeline powers. Max goes over in detail about the storm and the choice that she had to make to either save the town or to save Chloe. This dialogue changes quite a bit depending on what you chose, with Max discussing how she either had to save Chloe or she had to save Arcadia Bay, and how she hasn't used her power since then. We also learn how Safi's shape-shifting power works, how she nudges people's perception of her to change into others, and how it needs to be someone that she's met in real life in order to do so. We also find out she was the Vin who couldn't remember his password from earlier, Amanda at Caledon, she was Gwen selling drugs to students, and she was the Lucas who told his son terrible things, that it was part of her justice or revenge tour. Max explains the picture, that at some point in the future, Max will travel back in time and shoot Safi. Safi tells Max about Maya, that Lucas is to blame for what happened to her, and that she even told Maya to stay quiet. And through all of their silence, Maya ended up dying. Now, Max theorizes that these habits by Safi might be what leads to Max killing her eventually. Max proposes that they get justice for Maya, though, and that they expose Lucas to the school at the party happening later on at the Snapping Turtle. Next up is putting the plan into motion. Safi has a lot of the evidence on a slideshow, but they need other people's help. Getting Gwen to back them up, which either will or won't happen depending on her attitude towards you. Safi convincing Vin to help, which will work no matter what. And getting Moses to help on the projector instead of Reggie. The only other big thing of note here is that you can help Moses finish his gingerbread house using a piece from Safi's house. A heartwarming moment for sure. Once everything is lined up, a new problem arises. Lucas might pull out of the event. So Safi shapeshifts into Loretta, and Max goes outside to help. No matter the angle of talking up Lucas or Loki insulting him, he decides to not pull out of the event. He puts his coat on the rack inside, and Max looks through it, finding a gun, the one that she will use to kill Safi. She gives the gun over to Safi, though, and they turn their attention back to Lucas. As Lucas begins his speech, beginning with his book being reworked into a movie, the projector starts playing Safi's evidence, and Vin turns on him. They reveal that he stole from Maya and used her work to get big. But then Lucas whispers something to Vin, and he backs off. Safi gets upset, and they need a way to finish Lucas off. Max has the choice to send Safi up as herself or shapeshift into Vin. No matter what, though, Lucas is exposed, but goes up to Safi and tells her she'll want to hear what he has to say. Max is worried, but Safi reminds her that she's the one with the gun. Max finishes up any loose ends, but then Lucas walks into the bar alone. Lucas tells Max that he gave Safi the truth and leaves, but everyone starts freaking out, speaking lines that Safi would say and grabbing their heads. Max, being unaffected, though, leaves the snapping turtle. Outside, she finds others still affected by whatever is happening with Safi. She even gets hit for a second, and then the storm arrives. She rushes up to the overpass to find Safi holding her mom at gunpoint. Safi tells Max that it's been the mom all along. She covered everything up. She canceled her book deal. She's even kept her away from her father. Max tells Safi that what happened at Arcadia Bay is happening here too, and that she has to stop. Safi begins to lose control and starts turning into other people, and then also gets a nosebleed. Max has the option to either talk Safi down or rush her for her gun. Either way, it'll result in her shooting her mom in the shoulder. Safi loses control even more, and Max, upset that she failed to stop all this, crawls close to her, grabs her hand, and pulls out the picture of the owl that she took before everything started falling apart. Chapter 5 begins with Max waking up from the same position that she blacked out in at the beginning of the game, but the storm is now there too. Max walks to the top of the overpass to find Safi. Safi is shocked Max was able to do all this, with Max saying that the storm had followed her there. Safi hands Max the gun and wants her to shoot her. Max doesn't want to do it, but Safi talks about how it wasn't even her back there anymore and that this needs to happen. Max takes the gun, aims, but then Safi takes the picture and tells Max that maybe the three of them, Maya included, are cursed. Max refuses, throws the gun into the storm, and then says one of my favorite lines of the game.
But I'm not gonna make another impossible choice between two shitty futures. Come on.
She grabs Safi's hands and they walk into the storm. Max awakens in the North Quad with the storm far away and no one else being outside. She gets a weird text from her parents and she's unable to respond to it. She also starts to hear Safi calling out to Max, but she can't find her. She runs into Diamond, who said that she walked out of the snapping turtle and ended up there. They look up and they see the double moons, which also is a callback to Life is Strange 1. Max tells Diamond they should get inside, but when she enters, she appears at the observatory with Moses. She gets more texts from her cats if you got the deluxe edition, and Warren from Life is Strange 1. Max notices something is off, though, and upon talking to Moses, this is confirmed. He's talking and acting like Safi, and even asks her the question of what she would do if the world ended in 24 hours, which connects the dots with Max to take a picture. Upon taking a double exposure picture, Moses snaps back, telling Max that Safi had him trapped, safe, but pushed away as Safi occupied his body. Then we get this.
When a door closes, the window opens.
Max wakes up in a very familiar setting, the girls' bathroom in Blackwell. Max starts to hear the lines that Nathan said to Chloe, and when she looks, she sees herself playing the part of Nathan and Safi playing the part of Chloe. The gun goes off, Max reaches out as she did in the first game, and they disappear. There's some changes to the bathroom, most notably a picture with Max replacing Chloe with Safi at the end of the world party in 2013. She gets a few more texts from Victoria and Kate Marsh. Then she hears a noise inside one of the stalls and kicks the door open. When she finds the right one, she's transported to the bowling alley from the beginning of the game. When she switches timelines, she sees multiple objects from Jefferson's darkroom, including the door in which she's locked in, binders with the victims' names on it, and even pictures that Jefferson took. Then we see the chair that she was strapped to, with Max realizing she needs to face her fears to get out. She sits down but is now trapped. She hears a line that Jefferson told her in the first game, although this time it's told by Lucas. Max eventually breaks out, saying once is all he gets. She's now able to climb the ladder down to Lucas and Loretta. Max can talk to Loretta, who's panicking with everything happening, and Max can calm her down and tells her she'll explain what's happening later. Next up, she has to free Lucas from Safi, the same way she did Moses. Next up is talking Reggie down, who's also panicking. Max doesn't know for sure what's happening, but describes a time vortex that manifested in the storm. Then she talks to Vin, who knows that whatever is going on is connected to Safi and her pain. He tells Max that he knows Safi doesn't blame him, and in fact, she doesn't even think of him. He tells Max that he was in love with her, and Max tells him to focus on what's in front of him and that she'll fix this. She leaves the bowling alley and then appears at the bar. Amanda is confused as to what's going on, and Gwen is stuck outside. On her path to get to Gwen, Max starts walking through motels that she stayed at as she was bouncing around the country after Life is Strange 1. There's callbacks to Chloe, whether she's alive or dead, and as Max leaves each room, she gets more and more tired, until all the colors in the game have actually been erased, and Max has to lay down. Max snaps out of her haze, pushes the door on the wall, and gets back to the snapping turtle. Amanda was worried about her, but she promises her, just like everyone else, that she'll explain everything later. She's now able to go outside and get Gwen, who needs to be saved like Moses and Lucas. Max leaves Gwen with Amanda, and she continues on. Next up, Max is back at the North Quad during the day, and Safi is there. They share a hug, and Max asks how Safi is. Safi thanks Max, but they're still trapped inside the storm. Safi talks about how she has Max to put things back together, and Max is able to pat herself on the back if she wants to. Next up, they're sharing a drink at the bar, and Safi asks about the repercussions of what has just happened. People will remember it. Max didn't take away their memories, but they can deal with the consequences. Then they're at the observatory. Safi is appreciative that Max has helped fix things, but she still feels like things are a lost cause. She needs a clean break, she says. Max tries to talk her down, and then has to tell Safi about what she did after the end of Life is Strange. This doesn't change no matter which ending you picked. Max runs away, and that she shouldn't have run away, and Safi shouldn't either. Safi says people like them deserve better, and even compares them to gods or monsters. Max expresses confidence that things will work out and that she's done running and that they can fix things and be okay. Next up, they appear in Max's house, passing the bottle cap. Safi realizes that the last piece of her is inside Max, and for whatever reason, it's not hurting her like it did everybody else. Max taking a double exposure picture of herself is their way out, and so she does it. Max snaps back into the present time, out of the storm, and sees Yasmin hurt on the ground. Safi reminds Max of the clean break, and Max tries to talk her down. Safi mocks Max by changing into people she knows and that she can truly be anybody. Safi tells Max that she can fix anything, and Max is able to push back, saying that using powers has consequences. Safi agrees and asks Max to teach her that they can work together, that she's going to find other people with powers and bring them together, expressing that the world will work however she wants it to. Max will be able to stay at Caledon, live her life, but when Safi comes back, she wants to know if Max will be there for her. You're either able to accept or refuse. If you refuse, Safi turns into Max, disappointed, and walks away. If you accept, Safi is relieved, stays as herself, and also walks away. Now we jump to a few days later, seeing what Caledon looks like after being hit by the storm. Max will get a text from her parents and even Chloe if she's alive in that playthrough. She's able to reflect on what's just happened, stating that she's different now versus when she was 19 and that she can handle it this time. While most of the cast is waiting at the Snapping Turtle, Max can go around and talk to Loretta and Lucas. Loretta can choose to continue doing scoops, or she can say that she's taking a break from it all. The conversation with Lucas, though, can be very different based off what happened previously. He can either completely push you away or tell you about an apology that he's been working on that sounds very rehearsed and victim complex-like. He does say he'll focus more on his son, though, so that is good news. Max gets a call from Yasmin, who also could have been forced to step down as president or remains, depending on the choices. Max heads to the Snapping Turtle to do a final wave of conversations. The conversation with Diamond doesn't change and is largely Max reassuring her that she'll be able to get through all of this. The conversations with Amanda and Vin will depend on your relationship status with them, either reaffirming the relationship or just reassuring them that everything's going to be okay. Gwen will either be there or not, depending on the choices made with her as well. Max sits down with Moses and talks a little bit about Safi and Max's decision with her. Moses, no matter what, sounds a little worried about a darker path that she could turn down, and Max is able to answer how she feels about Safi after all of this. They end their talk saying the two of them will handle it and no more hiding, which prompts Moses to ask Max if she's done hiding from Chloe and will give her a call, or return to Arcadia Bay, depending on the ending choice. The game ends with Max making a speech to everybody, talking about how what she's about to say is going to be difficult, might not make sense, and that she's not proud of every choice that she made, but it is the truth, and they'll get through it together because this time she's not going anywhere. We then jump to the post-credit scene with Diamond at the Overlook, and her nose is bleeding. She's freaking out, and Safi walks up behind her. Diamond is shocked that she's back, and Safi talks about how she's seen nosebleeds like that before, and that she can give Diamond answers if she goes with her. Diamond thinks about it, gets up, and goes with her. And then we see the line, Max Caulfield will return.